Most people probably don't have a clue who you are
Yeah.
or what your role in any of this stuff
I mean, that
is.
means I'm doing my job good.
This is Ohan, and he's one of the most influential people in Melee. He's the head TO of Tipped Off, driving the long-standing series' explosive growth into the game's newest super major. On top of that, he organized Melee at Supernova and Let's Make Moves Miami, was a major force behind the digital controller nerfs, and, a bit divisively, was 1/4 of the Nouns GG team, organizing and running Nouns Bowl, the Nouns Invitationals in New York and Japan, and Fastfalls. I think it's fair to say that if something is happening in Melee, there's a good chance that Ohan's involved.
For me, I'm just like me, right? Like I don't really think of myself in any like grandiose fashion for the most part, unless I'm like really trying to like hype my shit. It's like yeah, I've done a lot of stuff. I've been around the block, and I think in a couple different ways. Like I obviously run and have worked on a lot of tournaments, right? Like I've done my own tournaments. I've done obviously like Nouns tournaments. I've worked on other big tournaments, right? Like supernovas and stuff with like the Gommel people and stuff like that, right? But I really say over maybe the past 18 months was the first time where it's like I've really been involved in kind of like the high level like melee. I don't really like call it like politicking, but just like policy and just like like dealing with like kind of community upkeep, right? And I think the sad thing I realized is a lot of my peers do not do both, right? Like the people who run the biggest tournaments, who are generally losing the most money, who are work the hardest and the most underpaid, are also the people who don't have the time to really do like community upkeep labor. And so from that perspective, I realized it was kind of different. It was almost like two different camps of like how that whole like process operated.
But for the past year, you've been dipping your toes into both sections. Jumping in really.
I think everybody, it was pretty transparent that I was like a paid TO person, right? And I did a lot of things outside of TOing, obviously, right? When I was working with Nouns, and you obviously know that. Maybe to other people it's like less transparent, but like I obviously had a lot of roles and responsibilities that like weren't just like doing melee tournament stuff, right? I wish I only had to deal with melee tournament stuff, but it's one of those things where like I think just by nature of like being someone in the scene that is like paid in some capacity, right? I did feel a lot of responsibility to take care of those things when like nobody else really like wanted to take care of them, right? Melee so often is like run off the back of like volunteers, even at the highest level, right? Like it's not like somebody gets like paid to like do like a band case or something, right? Or there's like any resources like that. So yeah, it became one of those things where I did feel like responsible to like kind of go the extra mile because like I didn't have to go out and like do something else like my income, right? Besides like just my normal job.
You
So
ultimately were pretty productive this past year.
I'd say so.
Like you ran what? How many tournaments did you run? Can you list some accomplishments?
I can, yeah, if you want me to hype
I
my
do.
shit. I
I
mean,
do.
2025 was a good year, right? I'm pretty happy of what I achieved in 2025. So I think I basically worked on like six tournaments that were really like major level ish like prestigious tournaments, right? Like um I ran the most stacked tournament of all time. I was the head TO for the biggest tournament of all time. And you're smirking because I say these all the time, but it's like like I did the tournament in Japan, like that was a Herculean effort. Like I did a lot in a year, right? And it was pretty fun for me to be a part of that because there was a time where like even just doing one tipped off a year, and granted I wasn't doing it a full time, but just doing like one tipped off a year was kind of like the capacity of what like my skill set was really able to produce. But just like over the couple of years I've been doing this, being able to like get better at like multitasking multiple projects and like doing that with everything else going on, just like being able to tackle bigger and like more ambitious projects has been a lot of fun, right?
You were hired by Nouns as a longstanding member of the Melee community to run some events on their behalf, correct?
Yeah, that's part of it. So I think when I to talk about like my start with Nouns Esports. So they started off, they sponsored Tipped Off 14. I was really the first thing actually that they ever like sponsored. They were already sponsoring ACLO, but they had done nothing on the event side, right? Really. So they started up Prop House. It was kind of their first version of Rounds back in the day. And I think they gave us like $1,500 for Tipped Off 14 or something, which at the time, of course, like super appreciated. It's not that $1,500 is no money, right? Obviously. And then kind of after that event, I didn't really talk to them much, not until really the start of I think it was 2020, where I kind of got approached by some of those guys and we were in talks, and they were kind of like, hey, we think we want to do more melee stuff. Like, what do you think about these things, right? And so for the first several months of 2024, really until about the summer, was just like advising them, right? They're like, hey, what do you think about the signing of this player? Like, we're thinking about like donating money to this thing in melee. Like, what do you think about that, right? And I was just kind of around literally just as like as a free resource trying to guide them because I wanted them to, be as successful as possible, right? Obviously, and then also for any resources put into the scene to be used in like a pretty, efficient and like productive way, right? Like I know we were talking about this yesterday, like, some of their initial plans for like how they wanted to, inject money into the scene was just like not productive, right? Like it was just really, really like it wouldn't have actually amounted to anything. And so yeah, and then eventually it was kind of this thing where it was like there was like a desire from them to like run some events and kind of just become more involved in Melee outside of just sponsoring players. Like they're like, can we actually like build something here? And that's when I kind of got approached and they like wrote a prop to officially like bring me onto the team. And then yeah, that was kind of the start of that process. I mean that was how it got started for sure.
And from that, you were pretty busy in the Melee community as their liaison, but also in a bunch of other capacities, right? Like you had your hands on the controller rule set.
So to kind of like pivot that, when I joined Nouns Esports, they were doing, Dota, Counter Strike, Pokemon Unite, like, Street Fighter, like a bunch of stuff. And then at the end of that year, it became pretty apparent that they wanted to really focus on one aspect of esports, right? And like shrink the team and stuff like that. So towards the end of 2024, I kind of went and made a very conscious effort, right, to put forth the best product possible. Like we did the LA event, we did the event in New York and stuff like that. I was like, hey, like I think Smash and like Melee for 2025 has like the most ROI. Like we can actually like do stuff here. Like I was kind of I don't want to say throwing the Dota and like Counter Strike people under the bus or something, but it was just like they were not getting significant returns in those departments because the price to even sit at the table in those games is so high comparatively, right? I was always like, we're spending a fraction of the money on Melee and actually getting something. Didn't mean it was profitable or sustainable or anything like that, of course, right? But you at least were getting something. But yeah, so going into 2025, when we kind of had this roadmap, it was like, all the stuff we're going to do this year. And, we obviously had a game plan that even, didn't shake out the way we wanted it to, like internally, right? Like we've talked about that. And I could talk about that more later too, but it's like, yeah, going into 2025, I was kind of just like, yeah, like I think, like I said, I kind of had an obligation to do a lot of stuff in Melee that like, nobody else was doing, right? Like the controller stuff in particular was something I started on in 2024, even before I was, doing anything like Nouns esports related, right? And like that's something that has just been a problem for like a decade, right? And nobody wanted to put in the effort and fix it and figure it out. And so like that was like a side project I took on to like hey, we're actually gonna like try and fix this problem now.
What were the initial plans for Nouns, and what would you say changed on the way throughout the course of 2025 that made those plans evolve or change or not come to fruition?
A lot of it I think was internal, right? It's just like working with people who like maybe didn't end up being the right fit for the role, and so like we maybe would like get rid of them and like not find a suitable replacement or something, just like internal corporate stuff, like not even event wise. I think there were like some vision differences just like in the company and like in it, everything like that and across the team. But I think that's the thing, is just like I really understood what I was like kind of promising and signing up for as like a at least on the tournament organizing side, or like I obviously ended up having a lot of responsibilities that are more internal business related, right? That like maybe I didn't necessarily know I was signing up for, but it's like on the event side, I was pretty confident. I was like, this is like roughly what I can deliver, and like this is what we're trying to do, and I understood that. But the other three people on the team, like not really being Melee native or having any experience in this, I think they didn't really understand how it like played into the game plan, or like really what they maybe were signing up for. Maybe they had slightly different expectations, or they expected things to play out a different way, and that's just not how it went down. Obviously, I feel bad because I feel like we're speaking about this as if it was like some failure, like things went but overall I actually think like the year went pretty well, or like obviously there was drama and stuff like that, right? Which I'm, maybe we'll get into, but it's like I think overall I'm very proud and happy of what I and Nouns Esports accomplished in 2025 in Melee. Like there are things that we did that nobody's ever done before us, right? And I think it's really sad that a lot of people attribute it to ill-gotten gains, right? Like that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when I look at like a tipped off or Nouns Bowl or something, and I see like a Reddit or Twitter post that's like, oh, they paid Cody and Zane to be here or something, because I think it undervalues not even for my own sake, but all the other people, the countless like contractual third party workers that we work with to make these tournaments happen, right? Like a lot of people put in a lot of effort, and yeah, like we don't pay them to be there. They just choose to be there because I think it's fair to say that I run pretty good events from time to time. So
Yeah, I think that like one of the larger elephants in the room that I think we'll address a little bit further down, of course, is the community's mixed reception, let's say, of Nouns esports and its presence in the Melee community. But I think that, from my own exposure to it, I think that it's pretty fair to say that there is a very clear disconnect between the broader community's perception of Nouns and its workings and maybe people who are more intimately connected to either top level attendance at events or the running of events, who have a different relationship with this. I would say first and foremost through working with you and the people that you work events with.
I think a lot of people have very different perspectives on it because, I mean, there's really only a handful of people in the world that have run high-level Melee, tournaments, right, and events, and kind of understand what goes into that process, right? But I think also, and this is something I kind of realized as I, was further along the railroad track, it's like, whenever there's funding in Melee or there's resources, people do obviously fight over it, right? And that was something, especially very early in the Nouns Esports role and like working with them, that was very difficult for me because there were people that I knew obviously as like TOs prior to that role that were like, hey, can you like help me with this, like help me get my foot in my door, and I would try and help them, right? But like even I was like being taken advantage of by people that I felt like used to be my like friends, or like peers. People obviously they're going to do whatever they can for the sake of like their tournament or sometimes their pocket or whatever, right? So that was very tricky. But to answer your question about like the community perspective, I think absolutely, like, yeah, there is this whole thing of like people don't really understand, and I think a lot of people didn't want to understand. It was a lot easier just to hate us or pretend that we were like some corporate entity, but like in reality, there were only 4 people working at Nouns Esports, and honestly, I won't, that might be generous to say, right? All things considered. So yeah, it was a small team operation. And yeah, it was very weird to see people try and like treat us as like this like weird corporate entity. I think a lot that went to how people presented themselves online, right? Some of my coworkers, I guess you could say, right, my higher ups. But yeah, it was quite interesting to see the community response.
To be fair, I think from the outside, the presence of the Nouns DAO as a whole and not just Nouns Esports is way larger and further reaching. And of course, a lot of people have an aversion to its, the money did come from cryptocurrency.
Of course, yeah.
That being said, there was a pretty clear divide in practice between like the crypto environment and the Nouns GG ecosystem.
Yeah.
That I don't think was ever really communicated to the public effectively.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think communication, like we obviously didn't have a social media manager, we didn't have a PR person, right? Anybody that's followed our history should be able, to know that one. But it's one of those things like, yeah, like it's obviously it was crypto money, and I think that did just immediately turn people off. And that's everybody's own personal choice, right? I mean, that's ultimately at the end of the day, I'm not here to argue the merits of crypto or try and do whatever, but I think the reality is just like anybody that went to those events, anybody that really participated in the ecosystem, I'd be really surprised if they said they felt there was some like invasive crypto element to it, right? Because like basically in my process, right, and like running the events especially, it was like we're going to do this thing and it's going to basically function just like any other Melee tournament, right? For most part, there of course were times where especially the higher ups wanted to pitch things like paying people in crypto or like doing something like integrating that more into the workflow and like kind of altering the product. But I basically always didn't go for it. I said, hey, I don't think this will go over well, and it's just like not going to lead to the best product. I took the position because I wanted to run the best tournaments I could for Melee, right? And that was ultimately my goal, and I think in a lot of ways I achieved that goal to a point that I'm satisfied with. So
what would you say to people who have negative feelings to the presence of the larger outside investors and this large stake money bankrolling tournaments, people who are not in support of this and really prioritize this grassroots perspective for Melee?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it's like not mutually exclusive, right, at all. Like you can have, I mean, for countless years we've had money in Melee, and also it's like coexisted with a like grassroots scene. But I think too. I mean, there are people. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, where it's like I don't care. I just go to my locals, right? Like, which is fine. But I think the whole Melee ecosystem is very, symbiotic in that way, right? Like there is an effect of majors existing, of players playing the game and content and stuff like that to even locals. That's just, I believe, to be the gospel truth, right? I would be amazed if someone could really argue in opposition of that. But, I mean, the truth is just like, money has always secretly, back-ended funded Melee, right? It just depends where that money comes from. People are allowed to believe where they want to believe, but I think there's a lot of intellectual inconsistencies with stuff like that. Like we've had tournaments that get money from the U.S. government, right? That have gotten money from foreign governments that I won't name, right? That have, taken checks from controller manufacturers in exchange for their controllers being legal. There's always money secretly on the back. There's another very interesting group of Melee people maybe doing a Melee related thing that gets posted to Twitter every day right now on StartGG that's also taken crypto money in the past, right? So it's like, I'm down for somebody to hate it, right? I mean, people can choose where they want to choose. They have a right to believe what they want to believe. I just think oftentimes it's very intellectually inconsistent. So
Of course, Evo is now owned by Saudi Arabia.
of course.
Circling back, we talked to Walt and Darkgenic last night a little bit. On Walt's stream. And you were talking about the different like silos of Melee, be that, the local level, the major level, the online presence, and how those things all feed into each other. And an important thing for the community is not neglecting any single piece of that, right? Is not treating any of those as solely significant. For example, if we don't have the majors in the top level, it doesn't provide that incentive for improvement for a lot of people, especially at the upper levels of PR, right? And so people graduate out of playing the game more quickly. And the game as a viewership entity or like a spectator entity is something that draws new people into the game, right? Like these things are all important.
For sure. I mean, I think it's all very significant, right? And I think the thing else, because that's the classic defense that I see whenever I hear this. They're like, oh, like local attendance is up and I just go to my locals and have a good time, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even here to argue and dispel the myth that local attendance is up. Like that's, first of all, just factually not true. If you believe that, I hate to burst your bubble, but I think, the thing is like, it really doesn't matter. Like if that's the only way that you operate within Melee, if you just go to your local and do whatever, like how unbelievably selfish and short-sighted you have to be like, I don't have to care about anything else because it doesn't directly impact me, right? Like that's just like crazy. That I think that's actually very anti-grassroots, right? And that's just not the way any healthy scene is going to operate, is the truth. Mm-hmm. I don't really I haven't gone to a local since I moved out here, right? That doesn't mean I don't care that they exist, right? Or care about maybe potential issues that they're facing and stuff like that, right? So, I don't know. I just don't get the vibe with that defense, basically.
To be clear, you moved weeks ago.
I did move 2 weeks ago, right? I did consider going yesterday. Josh said that we'd go sometime, so I'll go with him.
Running these larger tournaments does require money, which can circle back around to talking about you getting involved with the Nouns stuff, right? Because I think that we talked a little bit last night about the financial sustainability of these large-scale tournaments and how maybe it's more in jeopardy than people realize.
Oh, for
sure.
Can
you expand a little bit?
To start, I think I want to mention that, yes, I do run a lot of major military, I mean, more than anybody else, at least at the current moment, right? But I've also, I would say, ran more local tournaments than almost anybody else, right? There are people out there that have me beat, but I have ran a lot of locals in my day, especially back when I was in college, right? Like there was a point in time in my life where I was running 5 locals a week, basically like 4 or 5 locals a week, and I didn't live within like an hour proximity of any of them, right? I'd be driving all over basically the state of Georgia. I lived in Athens. I'd drive to Atlanta. So I think I actually have not just the major experience. I understand kind of the local side of things as well.
I would also like to take a quick second to say that despite my agreeing with you, have also been one of the local TOs in Toronto for the past 2 years. This is not
the bourgeoisie,
But please continue.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the truth. I mean, I said this on Walt's stream last night. I'll say this. I'm not going to name names. To my knowledge, really only one major tournament in 2025 made money, right? Like turned a profit. Like people can speculate about which one that is or whatever, right? But the truth is just things are rough, right? Like you have like a public one that we talked about last night too, is RJ made that longer, and so he took out a personal loan to pay for Collision. Really, obviously, like Nouns esports money was the only way a lot of these things were possible, right? Like I still would have ran tipped off, obviously, right? And would have suffered there. Let me tell you that. But and I did suffer there. But it's like the other tournaments, like no tournament is going to be generally profitable on its first iteration, right? Like generally tournaments are, passion projects, right? Especially when they start, they're a labor of love, And so the thing is like being able to run them and like break even is like the dream for I think like a brand new tournament series. But then also being able to like have somebody like work on them to actually make like a decent product and like do all that stuff is obviously part of it, right? It's like I'll use a great example with like Nouns Bowl, I think, right? It's like Nouns Bowl was a tournament. It wasn't a huge tournament. I think at the end of the day we had like 250 300 people in the building, right? It was a lot of fun. I was very happy with it. But it was great because like all the people that were there got to be paid, right? Like people that normally, like the Ohio people that we hired, right? Like Frecky, they were the head TO, and it's like, they were great to work with, and like they got compensated for running a melee tournament, right? And everybody got to kind of have a good time when like normally that's not how that process works, right? Like even if I just independently hit up Frecky or any of the other people that we worked with throughout the year and said, hey, let's do a tournament together, like they're probably not going to be paid because that tournament is probably going to lose money. And so like that's really something like I'm proud of and throughout the Nouns esports like track record is like all the people that we've got to empower and like kind of give resources to, not only just in like their personal life to like live the dream, but to like work on really cool stuff, right? Like I'm really happy that we got to like bring like the really good melee players to Ohio and like have that like synergistic experience.
In the interest of talking about enabling grassroots organizations to run events, I think we do have to address the Pat's House fiasco a little bit, and I guess Tidal Waves also was that same weekend. Can we break that down a little bit? Because of course that was a huge stain on the public reputation of Nouns.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that can be said about that timeline. Like I could obviously go on a whole it could go on the whole rant and everything. And what's actually pretty funny, and I know that you're aware of this, is like when that was going down too, I was like I was actually having surgery in the hospital, so like I was in calls like talking to people about this on morphine, like trying to sort through the mess, right? But no, it was something where obviously there are things that like I would do different if I go back. It's one of those things where like to a degree, like yeah, there are levels to where like I still question the actual like how do I say like impact that situation had, right? I mean Pat's House right now is announced, right? I think from my professional tournament organizing perspective, it's obviously going to do significantly better in its current time slot than the time slot of like the Plups wedding weekend, obviously, right? And just like that time slot of the year where there are like still other tournaments around it, right?
Yeah, just to contextualize that quickly, that weekend, I believe, unbeknownst to the Pat's House TOs at the time, was Plep's North American wedding, to which many top players were attending.
Yeah, it was in Atlanta. So like, there were even people that ended up coming to Fastfalls or something that like would have gone to Plep's wedding otherwise. So I mean, that was even a factor for us. Like, we obviously didn't want to run that weekend either. Like, Plep is someone that comes to all my tournaments and hungry, but like all those people are the people that my normal cast of characters, right? It's like even for me, it was like I was kind of having to take the L, but because of venue constraints and the venue kind of changing dates on us, and quite frankly, being difficult to work with after we had already paid the deposit, made it a very difficult thing because we had this timeline of Japan.
What happened there? So it was initially, was it North Carolina?
So like when we shipped the prop, like we obviously knew we wanted to do a third tournament, like that was the intention. I hit up J Gold and was talking to J Gold for a while about doing a North Carolina tournament, and just like really wasn't able to like throw anything together there that seemed super fruitful. Not because of J Gold's shortcomings at all, but just the venue rates that we were seeing in North Carolina was just like not something that seemed like a good partnership, right? Like, because at the end of the day, like we probably could have afforded to run a tournament anywhere, right? That we really wanted to some degree. But it's like if we're just lighting money on fire with like, oh, this isn't even like ever going to remotely be sustainable, like on the individual event basis, like what was the point, right? It wasn't something where that event was really ever like fully canceled, like I've said before, but it's like that one was really just kind of put on the back burner because we found this really good venue up in upstate New York, right? And it's like, hey, this venue is offering us what I think most people would agree is a pretty good venue rental rate, like the actual price. And so yeah, that we were just able to move quicker on that event to actually like have it basically be the third event of 2025 instead of a potential like future event. That being said, it's like once that happened, we hit up the event, we go to the calendar, we schedule everything, right? But there was some issue. I forget which initial date we picked. Maybe it was in like October or something, but the venue had some other event that was booked that weekend that was supposed to be in like basically the big area, and then we were in like the medium area, but they're like, oh, that event has gotten too big, and so like they actually need both areas, so like you have to pick a different weekend to run your event because we don't have the medium.
This was after you'd paid the deposit already, right? The down payment?
Yes, this is after we'd paid the deposit. Yeah, we'd paid the down payment with them. We'd signed the paperwork. And so they basically, told us we had to pick a different weekend. And so, we were looking, but we had this issue of like, okay, it's already, planning to be like late October, early November. Japan's only in a month. So like in a normal capacity, like we would just like delay this tournament to some time. It like doesn't matter. You can do it January, whenever, right? But because of this whole thing about like going to Japan and like all of that, and basically the effort that we'd already put into the tournament up until that point, right? We kind of had to pull the trigger and just like, do what we were able to do, right? Because once again, like, I didn't want to run the tournament that weekend either, just because of like Plup's wedding, if nothing else, right? Like, let alone all the other, drama and factors. So, it's one of those things where like you had to play the hands you were dealt. Obviously, like with communication and stuff, like there are things I'd do differently, but I think there are people that have a right to be upset about it, right? But I still sometimes question really like people act like, oh, this was like systematic or like intentional or something, which, is a whole other like conversation to have. But yeah, I mean, there's really no benefit to being on the same weekend as another tournament if you can avoid it. But I'm geographically as far away from that tournament as basically possible, right? As far as in the Pat's house situation. So, it's like really, I think it calls into question what people really thought we were trying to like achieve in that scenario, right? Like if I was running this tournament in LA, like sure, right? But obviously, like what do I stand to gain from running a tournament 3,000 miles away or something?
No, I agree. And I think that a lot of the people's gut reaction is in the context of seeing Nouns kind of spring up into this community out of nowhere with very deep pockets,
yeah,
and without a whole lot of ties to the Melee community, I guess, other than yourself and the other people that they worked with.
Sure, right. And I think a lot of that, I think, is because of this, like, the myth of, like, ill-gotten gains, right? Like, I mean, so many times, even from people that I would, like, respect and, like, think that, like, would know better, right? You look at something like the Pat's House situation. I saw people like, oh, well, they're crushing Pat's House because, Nouns is paying, like, Moki and Zane and Cody to come to this tournament. And Pat's House like can't afford to do that because it's like grassroots, and like that is just literally like not true, right? Like I don't know where that came from, but like you can hit up your favorite top player of choice and ask like, were you paid to go to Tipped Off? And like the answer is no. Tipped Off was maybe the most stacked Melee tournament ever, right? It had like 88 top 100 or former top 100 players, and I think the only people that like I really gave money to come to the tournament were like Amsa and Triff, who were coming from like super far or something like that, right? I'd probably say Tipped Off spent less on player travel and accommodations than basically any other major in 2025, despite it being, the one with the most top players, right? So it's one of those things like that was just like some myth that I think actually became like pretty widespread, that we were just like, big dog, like money laundering, like paying players to come to tournaments. And like, yeah, it just literally wasn't true, right? But I think when people then see the scheduling over tournaments, they're like, oh, well, the money is like making this difference. So yeah, I don't know. But that literally was just like fictitious.
Well, I think the irony of it is that a lot of players were being funded by Nouns to attend tournaments, but it was not top players. It was through like their voting process, which whether that was a little bit goofy or not, it still did inject a lot of cash and provide a lot of like up and coming and aspiring players the opportunity to travel to events that were not run by Nouns necessarily, but
no, of course not. Yeah, most of them, right? Like obviously for our events, we also did rounds, and sometimes they're even bigger. But I forget. I'd have to check, but I think it was like 150. It's over six figures, like 150 plus $1,000 was injected into the Melee community through rounds to like third-party, sources, right? Whether that's players going to tournaments or like we were sponsoring tournaments, right, and stuff like that. There's a lot of grassroots initiative going on that was very transparent, right? Because I think we definitely wanted to build up and support the grassroots scene, right? That of course was the goal with anything like that. Otherwise, why would we have a system like that? But we didn't like the way it was done previously. Things like the Golden Guardians or MetaFi community funds are very like Illuminati-esque, like you would just hear that like Big House got like a $10,000 check. So like that was really, I think the intention with that was like, hey, like put the power of this capital into the hands of the players. Like any player could have signed up to go to a Genesis or something, right, and got voted for. And sure, like maybe the system like wasn't perfect, right, but like that was the intention for sure, and there was a lot of good done through that system. So I'm very proud of that in retrospect as well.
I think from my perspective, part of my frustration, and maybe this is just a matter of communication between like the logistics of running tournaments being communicated to people in the public, or just a difference in priorities, like we talked about earlier, where people maybe don't see like the major level of Melee as important. But ultimately, like the money that was coming into the community was being used to run events and sponsor players, both like top level competitive players like Aklo and Junebug, and then also to send mid level players to tournaments. And yeah, like I said before, running these big events. And it's very frustrating to see from your side the generally well-intentioned like goal of propping Melee up and using this to the benefit of Melee, and seeing a lot of bad faith read into the actions of Nouns and of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things where like I think I mentioned this yesterday, and I felt pretty confident saying this, where it's like there was no negative intention, obviously, right? Like it wasn't like Nouns Esports was expecting to turn a profit, in the way things were running off of Melee or something like that, right? Like it's all DAO money, it's grant-based money. Like we were trying to do the best we could with what we were given, and in a lot of ways, I feel like especially on the event side, which is really what I can speak to the most, it's like the events did run identical to like how any other event would have ran, right? As far as their like systematic process, I'd maybe say they actually just ran, if anything, more professionally. Like people got, the employees got paid and stuff like that in a timely manner and stuff like that, right? But how do I say? Like, yeah, it is very sad to see, because like there was just so much good being done, right? And it was such a good situation where it was like Melee was benefiting at so many levels, right? Like we had major tournaments, players were sponsored, a bunch of people were getting hired to like commentate or stream or like work on events, right? Or do whatever. We had editors working for us, and even an additional factor besides that, like we had people that really didn't care about like Nintendo stuff, right? Nouns Esports, I'll say this right now. I mean, none of our events in 2025 had a Nintendo license. We ran an event in Japan. We didn't care, right? Like guess what? Nothing happened, right? Never got an email. They don't exist. They're the boogeyman. But the thing is just like you had a org that didn't pull funding, didn't slam on the brakes because of that, right? And that's something I think very, very rare in like the modern Melee ecosystem and sponsorship market. And so, yeah, it is very sad to see that was squandered. And I think some people pissed it away. I think at the end of the day, like I think a lot of people didn't really have a problem with what was going on, right? There was a very, very vocal minority, I think, group of people on like Twitter and Reddit and stuff like that was going crazy. But I do think, of course, there were still tons of people that appreciated us and what we were doing, especially the people that actually attended the events, right? Like I did not really have anybody that attended the events have like significant personal issue with me, at least that I saw, or like that got brought up to me. So
If the goal was not to make a profit off of the Melee community, what was the Nouns Esports like motive into getting into the community and putting all this money into the community in the first place?
There's a couple levels to that. Like obviously, when we do something like this, we all sign up to do the thing, right? Like I sign up to like run tournaments or whatever, and then our motives for why we sign up to do the thing can all be completely different, right? But for I think what I would say was like the common consensus was just like we were given a grant money, and in the past like Nouns Esports had gotten money for esports initiatives, like to like benefit esports and do cool things in esports, and like tell the story of like, wow, like because of Nouns we're getting to do cool stuff in esports, right? Which is the truth, right? And so I think really it was just like, yeah, we got the funding, and we're like, we're gonna do some cool stuff in Melee, right? And that was the goal. And we tried to do that to the best of our ability, and I think we did a lot of cool stuff in Melee over 2025 and 2024.
So I feel like a lot of this conversation has been in the past tense. Can you talk a little bit about where the Nouns GG things stand now, and what the plans would be for 2026, if at all, and kind of the state of the organization as it exists in Melee?
I think it's one of those things where it's always been very tricky to say, like especially when you do things on grant or like in the Nouns case it's a prop style basis. It's like things are somewhat inconsistent. For example, in 2024, October, November 2024, like I don't know if we're going to, be doing things in a month, right? Like it can be very stressful to work in that environment and to thrive in that environment. So for me, I still don't know what the future holds on that front, right? Like there are talks and whispers, and I'm always working on stuff, but it's definitely something where I think the team of four that was working on stuff previously is not going to be the same team moving forward. People just have different experiences with how 2025 went, and while like I am able to kind of take them in stride and like compartmentalize those, other people it wasn't as easy, right? For someone that doesn't just innately carry melee passion, right, the way that I do and appreciate it to the same degree. If you're more melee adjacent, it's like, yeah, doing all this effort and putting all this money into it and then kind of just getting shit on, obviously it's not a great feeling, right? And you don't really want to work in that space anymore, right? So, it's one of those things. But yeah, I would say there's rumbling stuff going on. Hopefully, I'll have something to share pretty soon on that front. Because I just want to do cool stuff. I mean, that's always what it's been about for me.
But your existence in this community is not jeopardized, really, is it? Like, how do you feel about it personally? Not from Nouns, but as Ohan.
From like melee,
Like, are you still tournament organizing, or
Yeah, I mean, I definitely go through my burnout periods. Right, I used to be the young guy that's like, oh, I'll never burn out. I'll run melee tournaments forever, and I'm gonna go crazy and not sleep for like a week. And I'm getting old, man. I feel like a fucking old man, but at my age of 26. But I still have I have some things in the oven, right? I think the bell's about to ding on a specific thing, right, that everybody probably expects to happen this year. But I mean, I'm always around, right? I mean, the truth is like I still do love it, right? I think now it's obviously very different for me, but I still do love it for sure. I'm still gonna host tournaments. I'm still gonna be around. Maybe I have to, I'm gonna enjoy kind of taking a more like relaxed approach and being able to like really reignite the passion part of that, right? Because the thing was like when you're kind of doing it full time professionally as a job, like it didn't matter if I was passionate about a project or like if I was feeling it that day, like it had to get done. And so like really being able to like find some more of like what makes it special for me and like what keeps my drive is pretty important. I was thinking about that in regards to like tipped off through the day, where it's like I feel like I've accomplished a lot with that project over the 4 years I've been doing it. And so it's like, what do I want to do next, right? And that's a question I get to ask myself, right? Instead of asking a team of people or something where maybe they have different views on like what the next like stage of like the process should be.
Has anything changed your feelings about melee? Was it just being in it full time? Was it the public reception to the noun stuff? Is it just the general workings of having to exist in the space? Like, what do you think is, because from talking to you privately, you're feeling pretty burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, I think that's to be expected, right? I mean, I ran more melee majors than everybody else in the world combined, right? Basically in 2025, right? So like, it's one of those things where I was definitely doing a lot. I think, especially that's the whole thing in of itself. But then doing that with kind of the corporate structure and the other job responsibilities kind of got tacked on to me. It's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, I was doing a lot, right? To the point where I would even say it was unhealthy. I definitely look very differently at melee than I did, say, 12 months ago for having this conversation, in good ways and in bad ways, I would say. But for me as a person, like melee is very fluid, right? Like I felt differently 12 months ago than I did 24 months ago. Like it's never going to be the same. It's always changing, and you're always learning more and stuff like that too. So I'm, not too doomer, at least for the moment, in the sense that like I'm going to like burn out and like quit and like never come back or something like that. Like obviously my best friends, are in melee and stuff like that. But I think for me it's now a point where it's like, what is the next step of my journey, right? Like what more do like I have to give? Because like I feel like in a lot of ways, I have accomplished a lot of things I want to do on the events through. I've ran the biggest, I've ran the most stacked, the most, streamed. I've taken us to Tokyo, right? I've gotten people jobs and people have gotten to live their dreams, and we've, given hundreds of thousands of dollars to people in the melee community, right? It's like, what is the next thing for me? Like, what is my next like step, big project where it's like, this is what I want to achieve in melee, right? And I think that's kind of a question I have to like, sort out for myself in a lot of ways.
Well, it kind of feels like that's tied to like Melee's trajectory in general, not because of your individual influence necessarily, but just because, there's lots of talks about the state of Melee right now, and I know that we talk a lot about the sustainability of it on a large scale. Melee has really made a consistent habit or pattern of sucking the soul out of people until they burn out, and moving from one large source of capital to another. And it feels like its ability to keep doing both of those things is waning.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I talked about this on Walt's stream last night, where I think really when I started at the local level, the major level, everything, there was this just method of just like we burn through people like we're shoveling coal in the fire, where like somebody does everything until they get burnt out or just like they have a bad tournament, lose a bunch of money, and then we just never hear from them again, right? And like maybe we do a nice tweet or Smashboard post to like honor them, but it's one of those things where it's just like we don't have the people anymore, right? Like we need to find a better way, and that's really kind of something that I tried to facilitate. I use like we can use like Nouns Invitational for an instance, right? It's like, Watch, who's an amazing, amazing local Japanese TO, right? That does a lot of stuff and like hooks up with the venue and like facilitated a lot of that tournament functioning. Being able to, pay him, empower him to be able to do cool stuff, like that was really what I ultimately like wanted to achieve, right? It was almost to be this like middleman of just like giving resources to TOs, like providing that oversight, helping them do the things they need to do, like with the top players or content or whatever, right? And like streamline this process. Like that was kind of like my, I think, grand vision for like how that all would have worked out. But that's just not the world we live in, unfortunately. But that was kind of the goal, was to create a better system for that, for sure.
A question from chat. Does seeing an increasing number of top players move on from the game or pivot their attention towards other avenues impact your outlook going forwards in regards to tournament? Do you think that you, as a TO, have to pivot your strategy geared towards more of an average player instead of trying to get every top player?
I think it's one of those things where it's always been very symbiotic. Like I've always said, a tournament has to be worth it for the O2 or the casual average player. It also has for it to be worth it for the top player, right? Like you really can't just have one or the other, right? In most cases. So I don't really think my strategy at this time has changed, because if people talking about like moving on from the game or stuff like that, like I'm always just trying to run the best tournament that I can. But I think that's also because I have a pretty progressive outlook on like running tournaments, right? Like I'm always every year like, what can we do better? I never want to run the same tournament twice, right? Like I always want to challenge myself and my team to do something cool. Where I think other tournaments, potentially, I of course won't name names, have become very formulaic, right? Where they're content just trying to run the same tournament every year. And like, I think maybe that more so will have to change, right? Because the equation is changing. So
we were talking a little bit yesterday also about the fact that most tournament attendees are not even competitors, really. Like their primary focus.
Yeah, it's true. I always say I'd probably say maybe 10% of people at any given major actually care about how they place. The other 90% of Melee populace in that room is just actually the top percentage of the spectator market. Melee has shifted to this spectator-esque sport, right? Because back in the day, I think, especially pre-Slippi, even pre like modern online for sure, it was like there was mysticism around skill. Like people didn't know how good everybody was. People were relatively untested. You'd hear about some, PR'd Falco player from like North Carolina, right, that comes to like tipped off 4 and like, oh, it's PPMD and he gets like 3rd place or 2nd place of the tournament or whatever, right? Like that doesn't happen anymore, basically, right? Like even when there are the breakout runs, like everybody knows that they're like already good, right? Like, Crudo surprised people by getting 3rd at tipped off, but like, the thing is like we already knew Crudo was super good. Like he had, been tested through a bunch of tournaments and stuff like that. So I think, it's like there isn't as much of this factor in the competitor side of it, right? Like it's much more on the spectator side, and I think just overall in like the events industry, we need to like focus on facilitating that better for sure. I think that's a huge miss for big tournaments, is like not making it a better spectator and like cultural experience and focusing too much on competition.
The people attending in a casual capacity in a way that is accessible to bring in new people into this space is one of the most meaningful things that keeps the lights on.
Sure. I mean, it's what does keep the light on, right? Like, if we operate, if my theory is correct, that only 10% of people actually care about competing, right, to that degree, then it's mostly a spectator game. Like 90% of it is the spectator market, is the casual market, right? The two tours that just, play in bracket and they want to watch somebody win the tournament. And I think that's like really the trickle down effect. I think this even applies to the local level, and I think this is interesting when we talk, circle back to that discussion where it's like, I don't think everybody at their local is some like local Slippi improver person, right? Like it's Melee is like this social outlet, and Melee is this community and being a part of something. And that thing just has to be fun to be a part of at all levels. And I don't think a lot of people get that satisfaction out of competing anymore. I think a lot of it's just the community basis. A lot of it is just being a part of it and like, rooting for the team and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's like that's an invalid way or an incorrect way for people to experience the game.
No, not at all. Right. I think it's completely valid. Right. I'm just saying that I think the business model for big events has to change to account for that. Right. Like the fact that you can go to X, big tournament, even my own tournament. I'll say the fact you can go to Tipped Off, and like the only time you see, Hungrybox or Zane is like walking from the VIP room to the stage is a problem, and it's a problem I don't think any tournament really has fixed, right? Including my own. But I think that is like the change that's necessary, right, to be able to really create an experience that keeps people engaged and coming back in perpetuity.
So what would you say are the roadblocks to making changes that positively impact those aspects of the experience?
I think one is, I'll say this, I think one is just generally effort. I think doing something like that is pretty tricky. And already TOs aren't making money. They're already hemorrhaging money running tournaments, right? Like it's really hard to ask for more of them in that capacity to like, oh, we need to like plan out this whole elaborate, content pipeline or, experience pipeline because of this thing. In addition, it's also just like, generally, it is difficult to work with, the Melee people sometimes, right? Some are better than others, I'll say, but it's like, it's hard to ask people of them. Some people want to be compensated for doing stuff like that. I feel pretty confident that like if I asked somebody to do something, they would do it, no problems, right? But I don't think everybody has that same relationship with them. And so I think that's also a roadblock, is like in a perfect world, I think the players ideally are just doing this themselves for like their own brand or for like Melee as a game. But yeah, I do think right now it would take a lot of me poking the bear to get it done. And while it could be done, it would be a Herculean effort for sure.
Yeah, like, so what kind of things are we talking about here that the players might either initiate themselves or, be poked into doing?
I think player experiences is pretty good. I think Melee and just content in general has become much more like creator based, right? Like there are people that watch Melee through the lens of a Hungrybox stream or a Zane stream or Mango stream. Like it's not a coincidence that like Hungrybox is in like half of like the most watched Melee sets of the year. Even sets that I would argue were like not super prestigious. Like Kim versus What Is He at CEO is not like in the top 5 most prestigious grand finals of the year or whatever, right? But it's by far the most viewed because people watch Melee through the lens of Juan. I think just facilitating that, whether it's like a player meet and greet or like, a friendly session, like this is something Juan's great at, and I think it's benefited him. But really trying to take this like Melee general populace, right, and turn them into Hungrybox fans or Zane fans or whoever. You want people watching Melee through your lens is the thing. And so like, yeah, at events, I think like meet and greets, I think like literally even just like playing friendlies with people, just having like fun activation, stuff like that is generally pretty low lift for an individual. But for me to have to facilitate this for the top 16 of a tournament, obviously it becomes a much different logistical ballgame on top of everything else. So
I think something that people often don't point out about like Scar and Toph and the strong narrative trajectory of Melee like in 2017 is that, Scar was incredibly biased in favor of Mango, which aligned with the broader community sentiment and also with like the doc's representation of Mango as like the cool one. And I think all of those things play together to make a very strong through line, which was watching to see how well Mango does for most people, that was not disagreeable to the majority of people because everybody was on the same page. Like that perspective was reinforced through the Scar and Toph show, through Summit Couches, through commentary. It also just through most of the commentators and most of the Melee community that was broadcast to everybody being rooted in Southern California.
I mean, we talked about this before, right? We talked about third-party narrative injection, right? Like, nobody in the doc really did anything super special to, Mewtwo King was still Mewtwo King, right, or whatever. It's just like it's just there was a third party narrative that was written about him that was complete bullshit, right? Like, is the truth. Like, you think in that 2012 interview with Mewtwo King where he's just like, if you're not frame perfect, dude, 2012 Mewtwo King like couldn't tech chase, right? He couldn't shield drop. Like, the guy was not a frame perfect robot, obviously, right? Like, he was still good doing crazy stuff. Like, I'm not trying to. It's like Melee was just like it was just all bullshit, right? What was being spun, but that's fine because it made a good narrative. That was really the thing. It's like there was a third party person, in this case Sam Ox, that came in and injected narrative into these caricatures, and he built these caricatures, and so that benefited people, I think, literally, like, basically to modern day, right? Like, even I think Mango benefited from that. But that's something I don't really know if players can always do themselves. Like, I think that in some ways is like a God-given gift and like content, and then like your own like charisma and stuff like that. But somebody that's really, really good, like Samox in this case, was able to do it even for like everybody in the dock.
Well, I think that also because we all basically got onboarded with that piece of content, or at the same time as that content existed, and kind of accepted that as the gospel, it created an environment where there wasn't nearly as much pushback to this narrative and this like storytelling. Whereas now, with a lot of people in the community and trying to like apply some biased perspective on top of that, it rings very false to people in a way that, and people push back against it a lot. But I personally think that there's a lot of opportunity for individual players to build their own brands, and through that brand, construct a narrative for themselves. I think that like Hungrybox, for example, is a great example of, sure, the emblem and doc got the ball rolling in a way that maybe he wouldn't have happened on his own, but also through that he created his own content and cultivated this large following that was adjacent to the mainstream Melee in terms of perspectives. Like, it was a very pro Hungrybox crowd that was kind of alongside a very anti-Hungrybox Melee community at that time. And so I would think that maybe if the players are smart about positioning themselves, they could build up those followings and those narratives for themselves, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the things where like one is the poster child for like doing it, but I mean the game's also very different now as far as like, now people stream, like everybody kind of has their own mini personal brand on Twitch TV, and you have a medium to like put yourself out there, where like back in the day you didn't, or like it really required someone like making a documentary or a video or something to bring the narrative out, because it doesn't just come across off the stage and like in winners interviews and stuff like that, right? But like now everybody has a YouTube channel, everybody has a Twitter, right? It's very accessible. Like Melee tweets can still blow up and go public, as we've seen, unfortunately, I think in recent times. And so, I think because of that, yeah, there is an opportunity here. But, I think the last thing I want to say before I have to hop off here is just like this whole conversation of like, where's Melee at? And like, is it dying? It's like, it's never something where like all the copies of Melee just become radioactive and they erode and we can't play the game anymore, stuff like that, right? But the Melee right now, right, like the business model, the encompassing like way that the scene operates right now is not sustainable, is the truth, right? And it will have to change either in a very constructive way to like fix the issues and keep operating, or it will as it currently is, cease to exist, right? We'll lose parts of it, whether it's like major tournaments or top players or something like that.
And it seems like there is a vocal section of the community that is either okay with that or relishes the demise of the major and the professional player.
Sure. And I think that's just unbelievably selfish and short-sighted, right? Like, I'll give a good example. It's like, I think that this is fun, and we'll talk about this in the future for sure too, but like, I think the worst thing to ever happen to Melee was the Slippi happening, right? I think Slippi is the worst thing to ever happen to Melee. Even with that being said, right, like I can appreciate that there are people that love that. There are people that, work with Melee through that medium, right? Because of that, it's just like, well, maybe it's detrimental in these other aspects, but how like short-sighted and like selfish would have to be for me to say, well, I enjoy locals and majors, therefore like I don't care what happens to Slippi, right? And people who only play the game online, right? And I think that's funny, like the inverse of that, where there are people that say, well, like, oh, I only go to my locals and play Slippi. It's like I don't care what happens to like majors, right? But like there are a lot of people that go to majors, right? Like a lot of people. Like there's a very sizable number of people that go to them, that watch them, right? I'll tell you know, I mean, it's like 250,000 people or whatever watched Hungrybox versus Wizard. There aren't 250,000 people going to locals on Slippi. I acknowledge like there are people that only entertain like with Melee through that medium, right? And so I think it's important that there is like that like online element, at least like now. And so yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where it's just like I think when people just dismiss other aspects of the community because like they don't directly engage with it, it's like unbelievably short-sighted because like they somehow fail to see how they all like work synergistically. But then it's also just like even if you didn't believe they impact each other, it's just unbelievably selfish to be like, oh well, like these people really enjoy this, but like I don't, so like I don't care about it at all, blah blah blah. Like that's just not how grassroots scenes operate, and that won't get us anywhere, frankly, with that mentality. So
Yeah, I'm also going to have to get you to expand on why you think Slippi was bad for Melee. Otherwise, we are going to get crucified.
it's fine. I mean, I'll give the tail there. It's too good. That is too good. Like melee locals and majors already had to compete with like ultimate or like any the fuck else thing you can do with your time and your money, right? And now we have to compete with melee at home for free, right? Like net play was the best when it was like laggy and it was like something you did if you were like really trying to fiend and practice. But yeah, I mean Slippi, hurting locals and especially hurting Smash Fest and like the interpersonal part of the game. I do, of course, it was like great during COVID, right? It in a lot of ways helped Melee during COVID, right? I think that's very, very common, and like I cannot deny that at all, right? But I think there's a huge thing where it's like the short-term, benefit versus like long-term detriment. Like if we're going to be playing Melee forever, right, until the heat death of the universe, right? Like some people claim, at some point it's fair to say that maybe saving us or helping us during COVID for a year and a half, 2 years was not worth the fallout of infinite amount of years of like Smash Fest and like locals and stuff being crippled.
So it is that it's compromising people getting together in person, face to face to play the video game.
For sure.
That you think has been detrimental to the game?
Well, because I think before it's like you could really you couldn't play Melee without being part of the Melee community, right? You'd have to get, I mean, people would show up to locals early as soon as I'd put the CRTs on the tables to game, right? At like 5 o'clock, even if bracket wasn't until like 7:30, right? But now it's like, what? I mean, most people don't even go to their locals anymore, is the truth, right? Like nobody really does Smash Fest anymore in most regions, right? Like it has changed, or like you don't have to be part of the Melee community to play Melee anymore. But like we talked about, like I think that is what's the retention, like what keeps people, right? It's like people that join in the community, they're not like trying to grind and compete, they're just a part of something, they're rooting for the team, etc. And so yeah, I think that has been eroded some because of the impact of Slippi. And I think over time, that will continue to happen. And I think eventually that will just outweigh the like year and a half, 2 years of like, oh, we have like slightly better online connection, right? Or something like that.
Melee is an amazing game, right? It is my favorite game. I have devoted a lot of hours and years of my life to being involved with this community and trying to do things like running locals and attending tournaments, and I commentate a little bit. It is really important to me, but it is not so intrinsically valuable that I think that it captivates what is special about the competition of the game and the Melee community in your bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, look, you play more Slippi than basically anybody, I feel like, right? Like you have enough Slippi accounts for every viewer in chat, right?
Pretty close, yeah.
But the thing is just like, yeah, pretty close. But the thing is just like, yeah, it's just not the same thing. That's why we would say the Melee community, right? Like you're not part of the Melee community if you just play Slippi. Like there is that additional step of like going to your tournament, finding your local scene, reaching out, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, and I'm not trying to like shoot shots at Fizzy or something right before I bounce, but it's like I don't think there was like a lot done to like mend that process, like bridge that gap, right? Like I think there could have been a world where Slippi was like a very beneficial tool in the Melee community. And there's probably even reasons for that I'm just completely ignorant to, right? Like, with talks to like lawyers and stuff or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it's just like that's just not how it played out in practice, right? It has created this divided people, where we talk about like that synergy. I do feel that there's a portion of that online pie that just never connects to the other two, right? Like there's some broken, piece of the puzzle there, and it maybe could be fixed. I don't know. Like I said, I could be completely ignorant to it, but I do think that's potentially a problem in the future for sure.